at first impression, it can be concluded that Hungary and Serbia, due to the similar East Center European nature and historical circumstances, have undergone very similar development in the field of development of social rights. The differences can be seen basically on two levels. Firstly, I think it is because we are in a different stage of the European Union's expectations due to Hungary's previous accession to the EU. For example, there is an example for that. The Hungarian citizens can exercise their rights differently within the framework of the social security system, so I think it's a big difference. Secondly, we can also encounter differences in our international commitments too, which may not necessarily be a difference to Hungary's advantage. See, for example, that Hungary is not a party of the ILO Convention number 102, so I think it's not good news for us. In the following, I would highlight some interesting points regarding these differences based on your study. First of all, I would like to start with a similarity. At several points in the study, there are the references to the ratification of the revised European Social Charter, which ratified in the case of Serbia in 2009, and it was adopted by Hungary in the same year, so we are in the same period in that. You covers the presentation and of the social insurance system, and you show that in the slides too, which includes unemployment insurance, and it was interesting for me because in the case of Hungary is only partial insurance. Because the significant part of the unemployment benefits, the active employment policy instruments, are independent of insurance. So there's a differentiation between that. But there's a similarity because in the case of Hungary, the disability insurance is not regulated by an independent law too. So we have the regulation in the health insurance regulation and in the pension insurance regulations too. When I read your article, I had a fundamental question. That how the pension benefits are structured in the case of Serbia. How flexible is that system? I tell you why. In the case of Hungary, this flexibility is one of the fundamental reasons why we neither signed the ILO Convention number 102 nor undertook our obligations rising from the fulfillment of the principle of the right to social security in the European Social Charter. So I think it's an interesting thing. In Hungary, the disability pension and the pre-retirement benefits from 2012 are not in the pension insurance system. So that's why it is interesting for me, because we have a kind of regulation for that, but not in the insured-based regulation. And we have no right to take part in these programs now. We have that programs for the persons who arrived there before 2012, but now we can't get these payments. And in connection with that, there's an interesting difference. I read that in Serbia, for every 50 employed, it is necessary to employ at least one person with the disability. In our country, it is exactly half, 25 employees.
It's 20 Republic of Serbia. There is obligation for employer to employ, if employed more than 20
Yes.
workers, there is obligation to employ one person
Yes,
with
but
disabilities.
after
After 50, there is obligation to employ one person with disabilities.
In Hungary, it is 25, and after that, we need, yes, we need to have every 25, no, I need some help. Every 10 person, one. Yes, it could be worse for the employers. Yes, and we pay more because you highlighted that the 50% of the minimal wage you need to pay for a year, and it is 75% almost in Hungary. So it's yes. Yes. We also struggle with similar demographic problems as Serbia. Life expectancy is lower compared to the European Union average, and we are nearing the end of the line. So I think Bulgaria is worse than us, but not the others. In addition, we can also show the data that the life expectancy in Hungary, thank you, decreased in 2021. This is a terrible story.
Because of coronavirus.
Halfly, yes. We said that it is because of the coronavirus, but it's more because it was 75.7%, and after 74.3%, and more than 1% was the decreasing number. So I think it's a bad news. Another interesting data for me in this regard is that the average age is significantly higher in the capital city, more than 3 years higher, which clearly shows, I think, the difference in social welfare between the rural and the urban population. In terms of demographic changes, we should not neglect the examination of the future either, I think. One of the pillars of what you dealt with, namely the change in the average age, while I would also draw your attention to the other aspect, the number of children to be born. I think it is important too. In addition to health prevention, change can be achieved most drastically in this area. It is not coincidence that the Hungarian government is so active in strengthening the family support system and increasing the desire to have children. It was interesting to me that, and you mentioned in the presentation too, that the average age of the population in Serbia in 2002 was 40.3 years. And that was why Serbia is the oldest country in the world. Would it be interesting to see how this data stands now? Because in Hungary, now the average age is 42.7 years compared to 36.1 years in 2001. So we lost six and a half years in this period. In view of these data, the reform of ILO Convention number 102 that you also mentioned, by raising the retirement age is becoming more and more urgent, I think. Although I'm afraid that by the time the age limit is raised to 67 or 68 years, it will be just a little to solve this problem. You mentioned that the open method of coordination would serve to unify the regulation of the European Union member states, which did not bring the expected results. In response to this, I would like to know that, in my opinion, unfortunately, there is no good practice now in Europe with such a demographic and social crisis of Europe. So I think the OMC model cannot ensure adequate results for the member states. At best, they're only less bad practice for us. In addition to all this, as I have already mentioned, the primary task, I think, is to manage the labor market situation first, and related longer active life career, the employment of people with disabilities, and the reduction of unemployment to a minimal level. And I think without taking these measures, the preservation of social welfare system will be at risk, and the revised European Social Charter remains just a nice set of principles, in my opinion. It is clear that Serbia, with similar rules, it's struggling with similar problems as Hungary, and we can only find a way of this situation in a similar way. So such collaborations between researchers are also of particular importance in order to map out solutions and develop appropriate regulations. So thank you, Philip, for collecting and processing all these informations for us.
Thank you very much, dear professor. It was my pleasure to hear your comments. You told that the average life expectancy has decreased in Hungary.
Yes.
The same situation is in Serbia. In the previous 2 years, as a result of the pandemic of the infectious disease COVID-19, because before the beginning of the pandemic, the average life expectancy in Serbia for men was 73.1 years, and for women 78.3 years. After pandemic, how I told you, average life expectancy of a man in Serbia is 70 years, and while the average life expectancy of a woman is 75.6 years. The same situation as in Hungary.
It's less 5 years than
Yes.
before. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.